And now, it's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
Today we're going to kind of break from the usual path that we do and talk about literature, and one writer in particular who has had a big impact on how I view Christmas. And I would dare argue that he has a really courageous view on Christmas, and I'm getting to speak to someone who knows it very, very well. And I want to go ahead and welcome Ryan Whitaker Smith to the stage, a filmmaker and writer best known for films such as Surprised by Oxford, Flint, and the upcoming Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of Merlin. His books also include Sheltering Mercy, Prayers Inspired by the Psalms, which he co-authored with Dan Wilt, and Winter Fire, Christmas with G.K. Chesterton, which is how I actually got to know about Ryan, and this is going to be what we're really centering our conversation around today. It's a book that's really blessed me, and you need to just go ahead and order it right now, and you'll understand why as we're getting to the conversation. Ryan, his wife Patty, and their 4 children live in Franklin, Tennessee. And Ryan, it's just a joy to have you here. I'm really, really excited you said yes, and I'm looking forward to talking about a man that we both hold in high esteem, G.K. Chesterton.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to talk about Chesterton.
Yeah, so I remember my introduction to Chesterton because I'm a later life convert to reading. I didn't know the classics until I got into my 40s, and I'm playing catch up now. But I did grow up listening to a lot of Christian contemporary music, and Rich Mullins in particular was my favorite artist, still is to this day. And I remember hearing him talk about G.K. Chesterton in this book called Orthodoxy. And it was something that I'd never heard of before, but I knew if Rich Mullins admires someone, it's probably someone I should admire as well. I also went ahead and picked up a copy of Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning because that was also one that he talked about a lot. But it took me a lot longer to get around to Chesterton. And I picked up this actually a couple years ago. It's a combined volume of Heretics, Orthodoxy, and Blatchford Controversies. And I was immediately enamored with the man and wondered, how in the world have I not heard of him before? And I know a lot of other people have probably had the same question. So I'm kind of curious, what was your introduction to this guy, and why has he mattered so much to you?
Well, I talk about it a little bit in the introduction to Winter Fire, but I went to a small classical Christian high school, and my English teacher, who's still a good friend of mine to this day, assigned The Man Who Was Thursday as a subject in the class and as assigned reading. And I remember I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I was like a lot of teenagers at that time, even though it was an abundance of riches at the school. But I was lazy, like some teenagers are, and I didn't always read everything that I was assigned. And so I remember reading some of it, and it sorry, this chair is breaking underneath me. I remember reading parts of it and it not making much of an impression on me. And then years later, I was always buying books because I loved books. I love collecting books. I don't know how wide this shot is, not very wide of me in my office, but I'm surrounded by floor to ceiling bookshelves in here. I haven't read every book on these shelves, but it's always good to collect books with the intention of one day reading them. And that's what I would do. And I loved going to bookstores, especially secondhand bookstores. And I remember at one point I picked up a copy of Chesterton's Father Brown stories. It was like this big Penguin collected works of the collected stories, Father Brown stories. And it sat on my shelf for a long time. And one day I don't remember why. I remember I took it out and I started reading it. And those stories made such a tremendous impact on me. And I realized that I'd missed out by not reading The Man Who Was Thursday closely in high school. And so I went back and read that book again, loved it. And then, of course, I started to read all of his nonfiction work, which is what most people know how people know Chesterton. They think of him, they think of his theological works, even though he wouldn't have described himself as a professional theologian, like same as C.S. Lewis, but he wrote about theology. And orthodoxy is, the most well known, but also the Everlasting Man and heretics. And once you start to read Chesterton, you realize, number one, there's no one like him. He's just utterly unique and so witty, so wise, so entertaining to read. And also, he wrote so much that I don't think I could ever get around to reading everything that he wrote in his lifetime. So it's kind of an amazing thing. But like you, when I finally encountered him, I knew this was going to be sort of a lifelong relationship with a writer.
Yeah, he was so. He wrote at such great volume. And on so much. I've got in front of me an essay. I'm going to read just a little bit from it. It's written by Dale Alquist, The Society of G.K. Chesterton. This essay titled, "Who is this guy and why haven't I heard of him?" Which is pretty much how I felt once I started cracking some of his work. Gilbert Keith Chesterton, who lived 1874 to 1936, cannot be summed up in one sentence, nor in one paragraph. In fact, in spite of the fine biographies that have been written of him, he has never been captured between the covers of one book. But rather than waiting to separate the goats from the sheep, let's just come right out and say it. G.K. Chesterton was the best writer of the 20th century. He said something about everything, and he said it better than anybody else. But he was no mere wordsmith. He was very good at expressing himself, but more importantly, he had something very good to express. The reason he was the greatest writer of the 20th century is because he was also the greatest thinker of the 20th century. Wrote more than 100 books, contributed to 200 more, wrote hundreds of poems, 5 plays, 5 novels, 200 short stories, 4,000 newspaper essays, 30 years worth of weekly columns for the Illustrated London News, 13 years of weekly columns for the Daily News, not to mention editing his own newspaper, GK's Weekly. And I'm trying to figure out how in the world the man had that much in him to get out. I mean, it's just the mind. I just can't wrap my brain around having that many words in it.
Oh, it's extraordinary. Yeah, I mean, it's so incredibly prolific. And Dale's a great guy and a friend. And, Dale has kind of dedicated his life to Chesterton's work, and I wonder if even Dale has read every word that Chesterton wrote. It really is incredible. And when I first started dreaming up the idea for this book, I knew that Chesterton had written about Christmas a lot. I'd read a lot of his writings on Christmas, but I didn't realize he had written so much about Christmas. And you start to realize he wrote a lot about a lot of things, and it's just kind of an incredible. It's just, it's embarrassment of riches. Just reading Chesterton, it seems like he commented on almost every subject that you can imagine at one point or another.
And not only did he comment on it, but he had such a wit. I think that's my favorite part of him, because there are a lot of brilliant writers, and I love C.S. Lewis, I love Tolkien, I love Ray. I find most men who have gone before us just possess such endless knowledge, but there was just this little bite that Chesterton has, this little wit that he has that I just think I can only imagine that on a stage today, how fun that would be to watch. And my wife watched me so enjoying reading Heretics and Orthodoxy and coming to her and like, oh my gosh, you got to see this thing he said. And it's like he was living today. And so a friend of hers put up a book recommendation about this new work called Winter Fire, Christmas with G.K. Chesterton, like 2.5 years ago. And my birthday is in December. And so my wife thought, well, I'll get this book for Chase's Christmas gift. His birthday gift, and then he can read it for Christmas. And I got it, and I was like, oh my goodness, we have to read this as a family. And this has become an annual tradition of ours now. Like we literally at the end of Thanksgiving, this stays in my office, so I don't have to dig it out of a box with the Christmas decorations. And I pull it out every year, and we get started. And this year, our challenge is to actually try making the figgy pudding, because this isn't just a book about a writer. This is really kind of a challenge, I take it, to redefine how you celebrate Christmas as an American.
Yeah, I mean, I still find it amazing that anybody published this book. I remember when I was pitching it around, thinking this may just be too strange, and it may just be too thoroughly Chestertonian for anybody to publish it. But I was very grateful that Moody caught the vision for this book, and that they understood that it wasn't just a devotional. It was intended to be a beautiful gift book, that people, like your wife, would gift to their spouses or their friends or their family members, and that the intention was that it would be something that people would pull out every year and read. And I've had 4 books published now, and I can tell you, making a book like this, designing and printing a book like this, manufacturing something of this quality is not inexpensive. And so I was very grateful to Moody for putting the resources into this. It's beautifully designed. The layout is really stunning. It's filled with full color illustrations. So very, very grateful. Gold leaf on the cover. I remember when we were doing with the first Psalms book, Sheltering Mercy, when they had intended to do gold leaf on the cover, and there was a shortage of gold leaf at the time, and so they weren't able to do it. And so when Winter Fire came around, I was very, very happy to see that they were able to pull off the gold leaf. But yeah, I'm still just sort of giddy that the book exists in the world, and when I hear about people encountering it and it becoming a part of their tradition each year, that's just amazing to hear.
Well, I'm definitely glad that people like you take the time, and I want to actually open up and read a passage. And this is the part that really caught me and made me stop and think, because you really take on the whole idea of what some people use as an objection to Christmas, even Christians, well-meaning Christians, saying, well, look at some of the pagan roots of the tree and the lights and this and that. And for those listening, this book, every day when you read it, it's a devotional, and Ryan starts with an excerpt from something that Chesterton wrote about Christmas, and then you go into a deeper essay and really unpack it and in some ways touch your own life to it. And I'm in day 3 right now, at the bottom of page 24, and I'm going to read this paragraph because it's the one that catches me every time. When Chesterton makes the claim that, quote, the greatest glory of the Christian tradition is that it has incorporated so many pagan traditions, end quote, a statement sure to throw fuel on the fire for those Christians convinced of the heathen darkness at the root of the holiday, he does not mean that Christmas should be viewed as a pagan in spirit, but rather that it has reframed and redeemed certain pagan traditions with the light of the gospel. Though historians such as Tom Holland challenged the claim that the winter celebration of Christmas, and specifically the date of December 25th, originated in paganism, Christmas does share undeniable similarities with the aforementioned winter feast, not least of which the fact that it is a feast that takes place in winter. And you go on and point out how Chesterton is saying Christians celebrating, we're not following pagan traditions, but you really bring home the fact that Christ redeems all, that we are all, because we're made in the image of God. God is a God of many things, joy and celebration being included in them. Scripture tells us that God delights in humanity. He delights in obedience. He delights in being worshipped. He delights in communion with mankind. And you really bring home the fact that celebration is not this bad thing that we should shun, that as Christians we should embrace it, and that yes, we should reclaim those things that the world has taken and said, well, this is the excuse to celebrate, and say, no, we're celebrating because we serve a God who is joyful, and he is the reason for celebration. And so of course we're going to come, you tried to co-opt joy for your purposes, but no, that joy belongs to God and we're taking it back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Bible begins with a wedding and ends with a wedding feast. Jesus's first public miracle is at a wedding, turning water into wine, which is this, a symbol of rejoicing and feasting. And I think Chesterton understood that. And I think, the wit that you were talking about in his writing, I think is an example of sort of this childlike wonder that he was able to maintain throughout his life. Um, you know, that passage in Orthodoxy where he's talking about kind of seeing the world through enchanted eyes and water. What's the line where he talks about water running downhill because it's bewitched? I mean, he just had this. He had this ability to see the world through the eyes of wonder and joy. And I think with Chris, especially his writing about Christmas, that comes out. And so, yeah, I think absolutely we should be feasting and celebrating. Absolutely.
Yeah, going to kind of the childlike wonder. I think back to there's this one quote in Orthodoxy, and I was trying to find it today before I drove out here, and I have highlighted so much of this book that it was hard to find which one it was, but where he talks about childlike wonder. And he says, childlike wonder isn't, it's not something that is distant from us. He said, can you imagine? Maybe God looked at the sunrise and said, do it again, do it again, do it again, and looked at one daisy, and then made another one, and made another one, and made another one, and really kind of challenging us to step out of our seriousness and enjoy that childlike wonder, because I mean that childlike wonder is created by God. Should we view God through that lens?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's probably one of the most quoted Chesterton passages, that do it again passage, which is so amazing, but it's indicative of sort of, his perspective in general. And, I don't know. I'm always encouraged and inspired whenever I read him. And I think you're right. It's sort of, he reminds us that it's okay to be silly and not take ourselves so seriously, and to laugh and rejoice and become children, maintain that sense of childlike wonder.
Yeah. And he does an excellent job of it. So I'm kind of curious. You talked a little bit earlier about how you were surprised that the publishers fully embraced the vision. And I'm kind of curious, when you were coming up with this, and again, we're looking through it, and you had the devotional section, and then you go through other stories that he's written, and you go into the games, and you go into the recipes. I'm looking right now. I mean, here I am on page 202. Recipe for sausage rolls, and wassail, and mince pies, and where do you even find this stuff?
Well, I'm a bit of an Anglophile, and there's something about an old-fashioned sort of British Christmas that just feels very cozy to me. And so I've tried to make some of those recipes. I'm not a very good cook, but I just thought, if you're going to do a Christmas devotional based on Chesterton's writing, the book itself should be as quirky and as whimsical as Chesterton. And so that's where this idea came, emerged, this idea of, it not just being a devotional, not just being quotations, but illustrations and essays and recipes and parlor games. And I just thought that would be a lot of fun. It's, I think it's interesting, but I'm, as a filmmaker, a visual storyteller, I'm always seeing things. I'm always seeing, obviously, the visual side of things. And so when I was pitching the book, I actually created sort of kind of a proof of concept kind of booklet of sort of some of the illustrations that I would pull and how we might lay it out. Actually, I think I actually have one on my shelf. All right, so here we go. So I made a little booklet, and I found these Victorian era illustrations, and at this point it was only quotations. So like this was before the idea of doing the devotions came up, but I just wanted to make it very clear from the beginning that this was not just, the book wasn't just about content, it was about presentation. So it was important to me that the aesthetic of the book was really strong.
And he liked pudding, I gather from reading.
I think he liked eating in general. He was not a small man.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. And you describe him early on about, come imagine and taking this journey with a 300-pound, was a 6'4" man, which is just hard to imagine. It's almost like we're reading about another Santa Claus here. But
yes,
one thing that you can't say about Chesterton is that he was not a shrinking violet. He was not one who was shy away from the controversies of the day. He would take them on in a very witty way. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to him, because I'm drawn to people who are willing to engage in the issues of the day, engage in the cultures of the day through a Christian worldview lens. That's why I really appreciate listening to guys like Albert Mohler and John MacArthur, Vadi Bakum, men who have lived in my day. Mm-hmm. And I look back to men like Chesterton and Lewis, men who lived in the century before, who were also willing to take things on. And across his much wider, broader array of work, he was one who, I don't know how popular he was in his day. I certainly appreciate him now, but he did not back away from controversial subjects. He if there was something to take on that he could take on through a Christian lens, he did so.
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But I think, again, the fact that he often did that in a witty and humorous way, it's like he was, I think, you're talking about how you've highlighted all these sections in Orthodoxy, and I'm the same way. Like, it's rare for me to get through a page of one of Chesterton's books without wanting to highlight half of it, because he's one of the most quotable authors ever, in my opinion. But I think it's that balance of wisdom and wit is what is so amazing about Chesterton. He can be saying something that's totally profound, and the thought behind it, the intellect, all of that is sort of staggering. But then he's doing it in a way that's also making you kind of chuckle. And I think even the way he took on controversial subjects, or how he responded to his so-called enemies, the fact that he did it in a way that was somewhat witty, I think that was disarming. And he was able to sort of win over, even like he maintained a friendship with George Bernard Shaw, even though they were kind of polar opposites in terms of their worldview. I think they maintained a mutual respect. And so I've often thought, man, what would Chesterton be saying today if he was around to comment on current events? That would be an amazing thing to see.
It would be. And he really, I think one of the common themes, at least that comes through in Orthodoxy, is speaking not just about issues, but about mankind himself, about our fallen, depraved human nature. I don't know if he would have considered himself a Calvinist or not, but there's certainly, he certainly at least understands the depravity of man part of it. I'm looking in Orthodoxy right now, and I've got several pages here I put bookmarks in, and so I'm just coming to one of them. But I love this. The Christian admits that the universe is manifold and even miscellaneous, just as the sane man knows that he is complex. The sane man knows that he has a touch of the beast, a touch of the devil, a touch of the saint, a touch of the citizen. Nay, the really sane man knows he has a touch of a madman. I mean, that's just so emblematic of his ways. I think another one of his more popular sayings is, someone asked him, what is the problem of it all, and he said, "I am."
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which is, yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't. I'm trying to remember. I did some research into that story, and I can't remember. Um, Dale could tell you. Dale Alquist could tell you exactly where that appeared. I know there was at least some aspect of it that might have been a little apocryphal, um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think he saw human nature clearly. He, I think today everyone is. I mean, there's so much division. There's so much hatred. It's like there is no room for civil debate anymore, and people are it's just hatred and vitriol. And I'm going like, where's the sense of humor, right? Where are the people who don't take themselves so seriously? And yeah, I wish we could get Chesterton in there. I think he would have no shortage of things to say.
No, he wouldn't. And that's what I love about you making this book about him and Christmas, because it's such a challenge to look at Christmas through the eyes of a child, through the eyes of a mature believer, through the eyes of a thinker. You can look at this book even if you're not a believer. And of course, I would hope anyone who would encounter Chesterton would feel challenged on that. But there's something in it for everyone. And there's another scene in here, and I don't recall the page, but if I flip through, I find it because I know for sure I highlighted this part, where you talk about how Christmas comes and there's this big build up to it. And all of a sudden, December 26th hits, and you describe it as like the smoke left over at the end of a fireworks display, and the noise has just all stopped, and suddenly the celebration is over, and you're left with, what do we do now? And that so masterfully captured it, because I felt that so many times, but I'd never put wording to it. And you captured that really well, and that's challenged us. I've heard the 12 Days of Christmas song my whole life, and I had no idea what it was. I just know I thought it was just a silly song, and we've challenged ourselves now, and I'm really curious to hear why this matters so much to you, and why you really, really nailed this like you did, and if you meant it as a challenge, because we took it as a challenge to start saving things, and all right, have something that we're still celebrating on December 26th and December 27th and December 28th.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think, it is the way that Christians historically celebrated Christmas, and observing Advent, observing celebrating the 12 days of Christmas. And it's funny, I have tried in my own family. My kids will sometimes roll their eyes like, "Oh, Dad, I'm talking about 12 days of Christmas again." But it is, I think for me, it's that it's worthy of celebration. And I think we're missing something if we don't. For one thing, I think we're missing something if we don't observe Advent, and this idea of kind of mentally and emotionally placing ourselves in the position of a people who are awaiting a Messiah, and that waiting period, right? So it's the long wait before the revealing of Christ, the birth of Christ, and then it's a 12-day celebration. Then it's feast time, right? I think there's something beautiful about that. And this idea that we kind of do the opposite. Most people, as soon as Thanksgiving's over, put their Christmas trees up and they put on the Christmas music and they celebrate Christmas throughout December. And then Christmas Day comes, all the decorations come down the next day, and it's over. And so I think, I'm just trying to sort of encourage people to reconsider kind of the way they celebrate Christmas. based on these historic traditions.
Well, it certainly mattered a lot to us, and I think there's something so much more valuable you get out of it, because I was raised, you have Easter and you have Christmas and you have Good Friday, and they're dates on a calendar, and Christmas was the only one that I grew up with there being kind of a build up toward. It wasn't until later in life that we began observing Advent, and I look back and I think I'm very, 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 very Protestant. That's one area where Mr. Chesterton and I would differ. But I think there in some ways, maybe with all due respect to the Puritans who I love and who I read, I think there's something we lost a little bit when we kind of walked away from the Feast of Christmas and the Feast of the Incarnation, and looking at these things as larger things to be celebrated, not only individually but communally over time. And I mean, when you look at Scripture, like feasts were a thing, that God's people coming together and celebrating together over elongated periods of time, and I think that's a discipline that we've lost, at least I know in my generation, and probably several generations before. And I don't know where historically the ball dropped. Maybe in your research you have a clearer picture on that, but I think it's important that we go back to some of those observances and we start passing those down again, especially as culture becomes more hostile to faith.
Well, traditionally the church calendar was a way of sort of acknowledging that time itself has been redeemed by God, right? And so throughout the year, you're observing days. There's a cyclical pattern to it. You are observing feast days and holy days. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I am also decidedly Protestant, but I do think that sometimes we run the risk of losing sort of all of the sort of enchantment that some of these traditions can bring. And I don't mean that in sort of a magical kind of New Age way. But it is something that Chesterton wrote about a lot, this idea of sort of the modern sense of disenchantment. Charles Taylor wrote about this in his book, A Secular Age, that the world has sort of been flattened by disenchantment. And like, if you look back at like the medieval era, for example, Taylor talks about how the world was viewed as porous. And so kind of the veil between, the natural world, the supernatural world was thin, right? Was viewed as thin and porous. So there was a lot of superstition at that time. And so it wasn't all healthy, but there was a view that, spirits could move between the realms and magic was real and all of these things. And again, not all of it is good, but in some ways, I think I see it kind of the way Chesterton saw ancient paganism, which is like, they're wrong, but in a way they're closer to the truth than a lot of people in the modern world who have lost any sense of the supernatural and any sense of, a spiritual realm beyond this. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's, I see a lot of value going back to the, church calendar, observing those days. As a reminder that time itself has been redeemed by God. Sorry, I went on a tangent there, but you got a little Charles Taylor, you got a little, medievalism. There we go.
Don't stop, man. Don't stop. Louder for the folks in the back, man. Keep going. I love it. You got me thinking about how, I mean, the whole point of Christmas is heaven met earth. I mean, literally, hark the herald angels sing, the hosts of heaven appearing and announcing the arrival of the Messiah, and God bridging that gap. And I think I'm trying to challenge myself now after 4 decades of life and deeply ingrained habits of forgetting that. and forgetting
Mm-hmm.
and trying to remind myself, like, this isn't just a story, like this happened, this, like,
Yeah.
God was here, Emmanuel, God among us. And I need to try to walk, especially at Christmas time, in memory of that. And for lack of a better term, because it's not the best word, but it's the word I've got right now, to allow myself to be enchanted by that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I mean, I think we have to continually remind ourselves, right, of those things. I mean, so much of the Christian walk is just reminding ourselves of the truth because we forget, I mean, the the entire history of humankind is people forgetting who they are and who they're supposed to be. And so I think even for us who are in Christ, you have to continually rediscover the wonder of the gospel. And so I find Chesterton's writing incredibly inspiring in that regard because it does, it is a reminder of sort of the earth shattering, you know, uh, truth of what happened. I mean, specifically talking about Christmas, what happened on that day.
Yeah, I think it has made such a difference in my life to slow down and think about those things. Like, in addition to reading through Winter Fire now at Christmas time, I've got to where the last week or so before Christmas, I'm always reading through the Bible. I get through it about once every 18 or so months, give or take a few days. And I always stop myself about the week before Christmas and I just read through the Gospels, like particularly the
Mm-hmm.
story of Christ's birth, up to the point of him going to the cross. And then at Easter time, I stop for a week and I read the Passion Week, and I've got a guide that tells me, that here was Monday, here was Tuesday, here was Wednesday, and I read those verses,
Mm-hmm.
and it's made it so much more real to me, right? And I think it was just, I wish it's something that I had implemented sooner in my life, but I didn't know to, and I think there's so many more believers, just their walk would be so much more blessed if they did that. And that gets me wondering, and I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, and I don't mean to, but now I wonder, did he write about the Passion Week as well? Is there is there a treasure trove of information there that I ought to be gleaning from all GK that time of year?
I mean, he certainly wrote about it. I haven't collected those those writings like I did for Winter Fire, but yeah, I mean, one of my favorite passages in any of Chesterton's books is a passage in The Everlasting Man. Have you read that one?
I have not read that one.
It's really amazing. Because let me see here. Is it okay if I look this up and read it to you?
I need to read
Um,
that one because that one keeps coming up in other conversations I have.
he says, they took the body down from the cross, and one of the few rich men among the first Christians obtained permission to bury it in a rock tomb in his garden. The Romans setting a military guard lest there should be some riot and attempt to recover the body. There was once more a natural symbolism in these natural proceedings. It was well that the tomb should be sealed with all the secrecy of ancient Eastern sepulture, and guarded by the authority of the Caesars. For in that second cavern the whole of that great and glorious humanity which we call antiquity was gathered up and covered over, and in that place it was buried. It was the end of a very great thing called human history, the history that was merely human. The mythologies and the mythologies and the philosophies were buried there. The gods and the heroes and the sages. In the great Roman phrase, they had lived, but as they could only live, so they could only die, and they were dead. On the third day, the friends of Christ, coming at daybreak to the place, found the grave empty and the stone rolled away. In varying ways, they realized the new wonder, but even they hardly realized that the world had died in the night. What they were looking at was the first day of a new creation, with a new heaven and a new earth. And in a semblance of the gardener, God walked again in the garden in the cool not of the evening, but the dawn.
I know what I'll be reading in April.
Yeah. You need to read it. There's some amazing stuff in that book. It's really great.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. So after you get your next 3 or 4 films done, I'll look forward to what are you going to call that one? Spring Rejoice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and make sure there's gold foil again. I need more gold foil. It's look.
I know, actually, Dale Alquist just released a new annotated edition of The Everlasting Man, which I don't have a copy of yet, but I hear it's great. So if you've not read it, maybe pick that one up. And then my friend Trevin Wax released a annotated edition of Orthodoxy. That's a great thing for people who have not read it before. Um, it's sort of because Chesterton can be a lot to process if you've never read Chesterton before. He's There's a lot packed into everything that he's saying, and sometimes he can be a little circuitous and all over the place. So I think what Trevin did with that edition of Orthodoxy is really helpful for people.
Oh, that's good to know. I will take a look at that. Yeah, I read it. I kind of jumped full into the pool. Mine is not annotated. It's full leaded, and there was definitely a lot of stuff I had to go
Good.
back and read a couple of times. But I tell you, it was just so rich. I
Yeah.
immediately understood why someone with the intellect of Rich Mullins liked him. Did you ever meet Rich? I know you're out there in not too far from Music City.
I think I may have met Rich when I was a kid, when I was young, but I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and he's been gone for a long time. I don't know how old you are. I think 17. No, I was 18, I think, when I heard that he had passed away. And
Yeah.
what really hit close to home to me about that was the year before we were living in Texas in a small town, and the year before he'd come out to do a concert, but it was in Abilene, so it was like a 3 hour drive away from where I lived, and I was new driver. I was like 16, and no one else I knew wanted to go, and I was just kind of nervous about being on that long of a road trip by myself, that far away, driving back that long at night. And so I thought, you know what? He'll be back next year. He'll be back next
Mhm.
year. And he was not back next year. But I did go and see the Ragamuffins. They came and did a tribute tour, and I made sure
Oh,
that I got
cool.
on the road
Yeah,
for
cool.
that one, and I was really grateful for that time. And so
Yeah, he was amazing.
he really was. Well, as we kind of start to wrap it up here, let's talk about some of your other projects. I know, like you did the book, and that's what drew me to your work. But this is really a small thing compared to your much wider array of visual storytelling.
Yeah, I spend most of my time making films or attempting to make films. I always say I spend more time trying to make the things than actually making them, but that's just how it goes. Yeah, I've made I just made my third feature film, which was an adaptation of Louis L'Amour's novel Flint, which was a lot of fun to get to do a western, and so I'm in post production on that. And then, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I have a TV series releasing in January that I did with Daily Wire called The Pendragon Cycle, which is based on the books by Stephen Lawhead, Arthurian legend fantasy show. So that was a lot of fun. We shot that in Budapest and in Italy and Romania, mainly in Hungary, but uh, incredible experience and a lot of fun to get to make something with that kind of scope and to do big battle scenes, and so that was very fun, very challenging but very fun. And a few years ago, I made a film called Surprised by Oxford that I shot in Oxford, England, which was another great experience and based on a memoir written by my friend Carolyn Weber, who encountered C.S. Lewis's writing when she was at Oxford, and that kind of began a journey of transformation for her. So yeah, I spend most of my time making films. I kind of stumbled into publishing. Very grateful to have had the opportunity to release 4 books now. I never thought that would happen. As I mentioned, I'm a book nerd. I love to read, but I never thought I would publish anything properly. But the prayer books, Sheltering Mercy and Endless Grace, and now Abiding Wisdom, which just came out based on Proverbs, um, that really began as sort of something that came out of a time of private devotion, and that I shared with my friend Dan, and we started sort of sharing these prayers back and forth that we were writing based on the Psalms, and we put small booklet of those together and shared those with friends and family at Christmas. And one of those friends was Carolyn Weber, writer of Surprise by Oxford, who passed it along to some publisher friends, and we had a couple offers for the book. And so yeah, it's kind of been a whirlwind. Like it's very strange to look back now and think that, you know, four books have been published, but very grateful. But yeah, that's my weird life that I lead, making movies and occasionally writing books.
That's awesome, being a storyteller. Any future books that you're kind of envisioning?
Not at the moment. I've got a couple things I've thought about, but we'll see. I'm pretty focused on a couple film projects right now, so we'll see how that pans out.
Well, on that note, how can people learn more about your work and follow you and be aware of your new projects, and so they can be tuning in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I have a website for my film work. It's ryanwhitakerfilm.com. I'm not very good at keeping social media updated, so I'm a little lazy as far as that is concerned. But occasionally, you can you can catch an update there. And like I said, Pendragon releases in January on Daily Wire's platform, so that'll be out in January. Flint, TBD. We'll see what happens with that one.
Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to Pendragon Cycle. My wife is a big fan, and so as a matter of fact, when
cool.
She was so excited when she found out that I was going to be able to talk to you, because she also loves Winter Fire. But when I mentioned Surprise by Oxford, she was like, "I know that," and so so she
Nice.
she's really
And that movie is out on, you know, Amazon Prime and Tubi, and I think it's even streaming on YouTube, and also on Angel Studios platform. So that one's easy to find.
yeah. That's so cool. I'm so I know it was a work trip for you, but I'm still envious of the time in Oxford, because that's just. I like I told you, I looked at it outside of a bus window when I was there as a college student, and since learning about Lewis, I just longed to go back and just sit under a tree in a park for a day and see if I can just breathe in the air and imagine what it was.
It was an amazing experience, and especially having my family over there, you know, pretending like we're locals for a couple months in Oxford. It was a really special time.
Yeah, what a blessing. What a blessing. Final question. Who's a brave person you know, who you look up to, who has stood out to you?
Is it lame to say Chesterton, since we've been talking about the man himself?
Not at all.
I mean, to me, he is sort of the ultimate example of someone who's not afraid to just charge into the fray and stand up for his beliefs. So I've always found that very inspiring.
Yeah, his writings have definitely they've definitely helped bolster me, and especially I was doing the doctoral studies at that point in time when I was going through his book, and so much of what I was reading for coursework was subpar literature. We'll leave it at that. And it was encouraging to see someone who was willing to charge from the other side, and to do so forcefully and authoritatively, and well grounded. And that's why I enjoy reading him, because he's an encouragement to me, and he emboldens me, and just like many others. And on that note, I thank you, because your writing has been an encouragement and a blessing to me and my family. And we've bought several copies of this. We give it out as a gift to people who we think it will be a similar blessing to. And so just as his work touched you, your work touches us. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Yeah, and it's just Lori and I are still pinching ourselves that we can't believe that I get to interview you. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, I hope it hasn't been that much of a disappointment if you built it up like that.
It's been a real blessing to me. It truly has. And so I thank you for that. And anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I guess I would just say, the book is available wherever books are sold. It's in all the usual places, and yeah, pick up a copy and share it with your friends.
Makes a great Christmas gift.
Yes, it does. But it's the way your wife gave it to you. Well, your birthday is before Christmas, which is really nice. It's really ideal to get it a few weeks before Christmas rather than on Christmas Day, because it gives you some time to to make your way through the book.
This is true. This is true. Well,
Great early Christmas gift.
great early Christmas gift. Yeah. Well, we will be cracking it open here and reading through it this Christmas season as well. So, Ryan, thank you so much. It's great work that you've done. And everyone, when you finish checking out Ryan's website and ordering this book that you absolutely need to get, next thing you should do is go to herzogfoundation.com and check them out, because they're doing awesome work to help accelerate Christian education nationwide. And if you still have energy and you want to know more about my other stuff, you can head on over to chasespears.com. Here on this show, we try to bring you stories and profiles and courage to show you too can take a stand. But it's up to you to put these principles into practice. It's up to you to find your spine. So get to it.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.